thank you very much for the big turnout. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to come and talk about the proposed kelp farm that we're proposing for Disaster Bay. I want to start by saying I know not everyone is happy about it, but I'm hoping that the story, the background, the reasons are going to mean something to you, because they certainly mean something to me, because, you know, been a part of this town for a long time. I care about it deeply. And so I'd like to break this meeting up into 4 parts. The project background, which is effectively, why am I here? Why have I spent 6 years of my life looking at this as an opportunity, but also an opportunity to solve a problem? And if you had said to me 7 years ago, when I was an IT guy, relatively unregulated industry, that I'd be here and I would have looked at kelp for the last 6 years, I would have said to you, you're insane. But it's funny, the things that motivate you and the journey that you go on in your life. So the project background, effectively the why, the project details. Really want to talk about really what are we trying to do here? What does it mean? How does it affect us? And then the regulatory approvals and the timing, because we are the most regulated country in the whole world. And New South Wales is at the top of the tree when it comes to regulatory approval. I think you should think that's a good thing. I do now, as I realise how complicated this has been. Going down into detail is incredibly important. And then questions and feedback. I've tried to take, you know, the questions that have gone online. We've got about 100 people who have dialed into this presentation. So welcome to the Wonboyn Fire Shed. You know, they have to, just for background, they have to move the fire engines out from here so that we can have this presentation here with everyone. So again, thank you all for coming. Thank you for people at home who are making time. My journey at Wonboyn is my whole life long. This, I'm afraid to say my age, but this is in the 1960s. That's my grandmother Anne Hemingway. That was when I was a baby. I remember this place when the road into Wonboyn was a dirt road.
Me too.
My parents talk about what it was like here when it was a dirt road from Bairnsdale. I just want you to, so it was a long, long journey. People were very committed. Wonboyn House was really the only thing that was here. My great-grandfather used to come here to fish, and it was a journey to do that. And so when you cross over Hemingway Creek, as you go down to Myrtle Cove, you cross over Hemingway Creek. That's named after the Hemingways, who are really a big part of the history here at Wonboyn. And I want you to know, I've been here my whole life, holidays my whole life long. I know I'm not a permanent resident, as has been pointed out to me online numerous times, but I care about this place and love this place more than any other place on the face of this earth. And I would do nothing to harm it, because as is the legacy with my family, we're 5th generation here. And, you know, when I say 5th generation, I know that pales into insignificance against Aboriginal involvement, the Bidwell Nation, which is here 50,000 years. I know it's nothing, but 5 generations to my family is absolutely everything. And so I say to you, I care about this place, and I'm not someone coming into town saying, hey, I think this is a fantastic idea. I'm a former IT guy, and you might say, well, that means you probably know nothing about kelp and you probably know nothing about the ocean. Certainly 6 years ago, that was true. This is Kyron Crane, if I can get Kyron to just stand for a second. Kyron did all the work for the government on the estuary management policies, which I know the oyster farmers that are here would be very interested in. He's done multiple community consultations. He's a marine biologist. I have the great privilege of working with him to replace synthetic fertilizers with kelp-based fertilizers, which I'm going to talk a little bit about. But he is, in and of itself, a subject matter expert on this area and Disaster Bay, and he's dived every single day. He's skin dived every single day since he was a little boy, grew up here in Eden. So the provenance is certainly there, and he'll talk a little bit later. So let's go straight into the project background. I watched this documentary, and I don't know whether any of you have seen this documentary. It came out in 2018. It's called 2040. And what it talks about is, what will the world be like in 22 years from when it was made? What are the changes that are taking place around us, whether we would have them or not? And this talked about the fact that our oceans are in trouble. And It specifically talked about the heat that is going into our oceans and the effect it's having. And kelp farming was determined in this documentary as one of the saviors of our oceans and also a bio-fertilizer asset. Now, if you don't know much about synthetic fertilizers, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but this should be alarming to all of us, and I'll go into more detail. Kelp, one of the fastest growing plants on Earth, you may know this, it grows best in cool, nutrient-rich waters. So as water temperatures increase, that's not good for kelp. And Australian waters, whether you like it or not, are absolutely in crisis when it comes to natural wild kelp beds. We've lost more than 50% of our wild kelp beds. Kelp exists in these locations on the Earth. So you can see they're not around the equator. That's really green and red seaweeds. And you can see kelp in Australia really has two real predominant species, Macrocystis and Maclonia. And then they have different kelps up in the Northern Hemisphere, where kelp farming is massive business, huge business. Down here in the Southern Hemisphere, almost non-existent. And the reason is fundamentally because it's very complicated to get regulatory approval. These are all the major kelps that exist. Our kelp that we have here in Disaster Bay is this little one here called a Clonia radiata, or golden kelp, as you would know it. You would see this washing up on the beach, you'd see crayweed washing up on the beach, and you'd see this Davilia armata washing up on the beach. But the predominant kelp in Australian waters is golden kelp, a Clonia radiata. It forms the Great Southern Reef. It spans all the way from Sydney all the way through to above Perth. And it is in crisis. Now, these larger kelps can grow to 50 metres in length. All these other kelps, the one thing that's unique about this one is all these kelps are heavier than water. This one floats because it has air sacs and air bladders, and a Clonia is neutral buoyant, and we'll talk about that in a second. So it's the fastest growing plant on Earth. We've lost 95% of our wild kelp in Tasmania, 50% of our kelp Australia-wide, and 85% of wild west is lost. Now, I don't know whether that alarms you, but it absolutely alarms me. Then I start thinking to myself, well, why is that happening? And it's got to do with increasing ocean heat. Australia has these complex currents that wrap around our country, the most notable being this one here called the East Australian Current, which drives down the east coast of Australia from north to south, from the warm waters of the coral reefs, and drives down. And this is getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And that's what has decimated all the kelp stands in Tasmania. And you've got the Lewin Current, which is in Western Australia. And so as it gets warmer, a thing called upwelling stops happening. And upwelling is effectively the nutrients that have been built up over millions of years in the deep ocean. They come to the surface and they feed our plants, they feed our planktons, they feed our zooplanktons, they feed our phytoplanktons, and it's the health that drives the ocean. If this top layer gets too warm, and there's too much disparity between the top layer and the deeper layers, the cold water can't break through. And when it can't break through, then what happens is ecosystems die. And that's exactly the scenario which we've got. This is a healthy Clonia radiata kelp forest. This we took this off the south coast of Disaster Bay. This is a collapsed Clonia radiata forest, which is in Western Australia. 100 square kilometres died over a matter of months because the ocean temperature increased between 3.5 degrees and 5.5 degrees. I just want to put that in context. We're talking about a 2 kilometre square farm here in Disaster Bay. We lost 100 square kilometres in one single event. That is how susceptible these systems are to failure, and they are the foundation species of the oceans. They create three-dimensional habitat. They're home for all our crustaceans, our lobsters, our abalone. They're fish nurseries. They form the foundation bed of our entire ocean ecosystem. I went to Sydney last week to see Al Gore, Vice President Al Gore, speak on this subject. This is the last 50 years, well, 1940 to present. This is the average global ocean temperatures, and these are the last 3 years. Just want you to let that sink in for a second. We are outside the bounds of normal ocean temperature cycles, and things are happening in our ocean that are not good. Now you might say, well, that doesn't affect us here. Disaster Bay is fine. I was on the phone today with a fisherman. He said to me, Disaster Bay is great. I said, no. Disaster Bay is suffering more than any other location. So Jackie Brown, who's the chief scientist for the CSIRO, this is last week, put up this slide. The hottest cumulative temperature increases since 1981 is right here, right out there. Now, you might not think that that's a problem, but I'm telling you that this East Australian current is fueling increased ocean temperatures. Every 10 years, it goes up 0.5 degree. Now, we've seen in South Australia algal blooms that are unprecedented. Now, if you're not aware of what's going on with the algal blooms, that is the future for all of us if we don't do something. Now, when people say to me, I don't like kelp farming, 2 thoughts spring into my head. The first one is, I think you don't know what's going on in the ocean. You're not looking at the data. We just look at the waves and we look at the sheen on the surface and we think everything's fine. Firstly, it's not. And the second thing is, I don't think you realise how wonderful it is. I don't think you realise how beautiful and elegant and clean and the products that it can deliver. I think you don't understand. And I appreciate that people don't want change. I don't like change. But if change is happening, whether we would have it or not, that things are getting worse, you have to think to yourself, hey, maybe we actually have a part to play. We've certainly had a part to play in destroying our natural environments. Maybe there's a part to play in actually trying to make it a little bit better. And so I'm not here to try and build a business, trying to get rich, trying to be a pain in the ass and destroy people's livelihoods. I think we've got a moral burden to bear. I think this last 6 years has taught me that we have to do something. And so then we start saying, well, what is that? And how are we going to learn about it? Victoria has done mapping on the predicted loss of a Clonia radiata, as you can see, under scenario 4.5 and 8.5, saying what will happen to our kelp forest in Victoria. So it's not mapped for New South Wales, and we're just here. They predicted between a 62% and 92% decrease in kelp farms in Victoria by 2090. So let's just run that scenario again. 62% to 90 by 2090. If that happens, all your fishing won't be the same. Whale migrations won't be the same. Water won't be the same. Oysters won't be the same. For the first time last year, I see that we got some mussel farming guys, who I consider my brothers, the oyster farmers, the mussel guys. They understand what it's like to try to work with the ocean. They had a first major mussel kill this year. They've been farming in Twofold Bay for 40 years. They lost 80% of their stock in one day from a heat spike. Never happened before. True, right? Never happened before. So I say to people, gee, okay, we don't want kelp farming because we don't want change. Change is here. I'm sorry if I come across as impassioned about this, but I'm like, how do you look at crisis in the eye and then think to yourself, no, I don't want change. I don't want to see anything happen in Disaster Bay. It's happening, and the data substantiates it. And yes, you can say the scientists are wrong. This is universal across the board. We have the NBCRC here, who are great supporters of ours because they understand that research is incredibly important. Dr. Anthony Dyer, he's a aquaculture PhD and a molecular biology PhD. He lives in Adelaide. He can't walk his dog. Anthony, true?
So what Chris is saying is here. I'm experienced, so taking off my scientist hat and putting my resident hat on. I live in a small town about 50 kilometres south of Adelaide. And when coming to the eastern slopes, nobody knows how bad it is. So to put this into perspective, St Vincent's Gulf, which is where I live, is 6,000 square kilometres. And the Gulf next to that is another 6,000 square kilometres. Across the two Gulfs, about 4,000 square kilometres is what affected by this algal bloom. We can't go to the beach. Businesses are going broke. Oyster farmers can't sell oysters. We're not catching any fish. Nobody's buying any fish. We don't know what to do in the summer. In response, the federal government, Anthony Albanese and our Premier, Peter Malinampis, just released our summer plan, which is $100 million to try and get us through summer. Right? And in that plan, there's stimulus for businesses. It's a little bit like COVID. We get Kelp updates every day in this sort of stuff. And there's about $20 million put aside for building offshore the oyster reefs and regenerating seagrasses. So if I wear my resident hat, somebody sort of stood in front of me 10 years ago and said, oh, because I've grown up in the water and farming and fishing, I've got them kids. And 10 years ago, Chris was standing there, I might think, oh, not so sure, don't really know about that. But if you surveyed most South Australians now, I think we'd be saying, look, this is, if this can prevent some of the impact that's coming or here from climate change and this algal bloom, we'd be forward.
So what's the root cause of that?
So if you think about the algae effectively as plants, what grows plants? So it's exactly what Chris is saying. There's two main targets for us in those gulfs. We're experiencing a marine heat wave. There's one off the east coast, there's one off the west coast, heat the roof, there's one in South Australia. We had water temperatures about 2 degrees above average, and we've got a high nutrient loading gulfs. So basically,
Where's that coming from? Is it coming from?
probably agricultural runoff, and it's probably not coming through the Murray from the floods a couple of years ago. But basically, it's probably not one thing. It's just all of those things. Big bands, plants, We also had still warmer than normal period in autumn, and still conditions, which allowed the plankton or the algae to form a raft. So there's multiple reasons, but it is actually and human interaction as well.
I think if, and obviously I've been looking at this for 6 years, that the Murray and the synthetic fertilisers that come from the Murray and pour into the Fleurieu Peninsula, which is here, that's definitely a contributor. And, to what extent, and your ocean temperature is 2.5 degrees above normal. Just so you know, we're 2.5 degrees above normal.
Basically, you're saying that this is all caused by man.
I can't say that because but certainly the indicators are, let me put it this way. If we didn't have synthetic fertilizers pouring into there, this would be less.
Yeah.
So is it?
Yeah. If we hadn't changed the water system, for the snowing out, it's going to do even less because there's more fresh water.
But I don't know this specifically, but I know it's bad. And I know that we should all be thinking, well, I've had the South Australian government reach out to me and say, will you bring what you've learned here, which I'm going to show you now when we talk about the project, will you bring that to South Australia? And I'm saying, quite frankly, I'm too busy getting killed in New South Wales. The negativity, the misinformation, the lack of context. So we've got enough challenges. And quite frankly, I don't know that you can't solve this immediate algal bloom by putting something in the water now. You either have to do it in preemption of these kind of events, or you're at the mercy of them. And this is going to have to dissipate naturally. I don't know how that works. None of us know.
Nobody knows how long this is going to do. That's
How do you help farm preventing that?
Well, there's two ways. There's two ways. One is the kelp pulls the nitrogen out of the ocean, which is what fuels the algal bloom. That's number one. But I think more importantly is if you replace biostimulants with synthetic fertilizers with biostimulants, then what happens is you stop the inputs and you stop the pressure. The trouble is there aren't enough biostimulants, kelp-based biostimulants, but we are going to talk about that. So I promise Amanda, we will definitely get to that. So by the way, that is South Australia. This is taken from the Copernicus satellite. All the red zones, effectively, the fish are just asphyxiating and dying in the red zones. Yellow is bad. And the reason why you might say, well, how can you see it? It's because you get a reflection from the algae. So they can see the density of the algae from satellites. It's 4,000 square kilometres. So let's put that in context. The New South Wales coastline is 2,000 kilometres long. That would be all of New South Wales, 2 kilometres out, which is basically half our state waters. To put it in context how bad that is, that's our whole coastline. Now, I tell you, if that happens, you're going to be saying, hey, why don't we do anything? My view is we're trying.
It's been happening for a long time. The carpet just about demolished our whole water system.
You're right. And
there's basically nothing we can do about it. I know there is a virus that will kill them all, but it'll kill everything else as well.
Well, we're trying to do something about carp as well, and I will come to Ocean to Earth and their carp program, trying to work with the Vic and the New South Wales government to actually harvest out the carp and use it for fertiliser inputs. So if it's all right, I will come back to that. But you are right. I mean, the imbalance that's taking place, the Murray is the food bowl of Australia, and it empties here. Now, I can't categorically say it's definitely not only that, it's a combination of a whole lot of things. But ocean temperatures increasing is definitely the base driver. So let's talk about the project and what we're doing, a little bit of background. I know when you look out at Disaster Bay, and I know for some people here, you think to yourself, that is one of the most beautiful places you'll ever see. I took this photo with my drone. It is. It is absolutely magnificent. And do I want to change Disaster Bay? No. But there are greater factors at work here than just, if this bay was getting better every year and our ocean temperatures were stable and our kelp forests weren't dying and our fish weren't asphyxiating themselves in South Australia, I wouldn't be here putting myself at the mercy of people who disagree with what it is I believe. Now, it is beautiful, but there is change in it. This is the Coinia radiata. This is the humble little kelp, the neutral buoyant kelp, and this is taken on the south side of Disaster Bay. What is so extraordinary about it is, as kelps go globally, it's very small. It only grows to about 2 metres in length. You can grow a lot of kelp on a single line, but its neutral buoyancy makes it very, very, very storm resistant. So how does it work? The kelp goes to a mature stage, which is this. It sheds tiny cells called sori. Those sori then become females and males. So the females long-legged, the males kind of more stumpy. They then, to create diversity, different plants, the males and the females then get the right light and nutrient conditions. They turn into a sporophyte. The sporophyte then attaches itself to a rock in the optimum conditions, getting the optimum amount of nutrients. And then what it will do is it will grow. Now, as the water temperature increases, this central piece gets affected. The kelp will grow if it's established, but this breeding cycle in the middle just stops working, or stops working to a point where it reaches a tipping point. So what we said was, my wife and I, we sold our business and we said, what are we going to do with our lives? No one's ever going to remember that we wrote great code for the National Australia. No one will care. We said, we watched the documentary 2040 and we said, let's do something. Let's see if we can grow this. Let's work with the New South Wales government. Let's hire the world's best propagation specialist, this guy called Job Schipper, a Dutch guy, been out here to Australia a few times with us. This here in the centre is the cells called the sori. And this is what I mean about the elegance and the beauty of this. That dark section there, you give it an osmotic shock, the cells come out, and here's our lab technicians. And then what we've been doing is we've been building these biomass stores. So if you keep it in a red light incubator, it won't turn into a male and a female. It'll stay effectively without, it can turn into a male or a female, but you can double the biomass every 4 weeks. It takes a lot of seed stock to be able to seed even 1 hectare. And so you have to build over the course of many, many, many years, the amount of kelp seed stock required to ever be able to build a business around it. So we knew we had to start years ago. So in 2020, we started this, we got the cells, then we started saying, let's test it. And here's life as it begins. When you give it white light, so they start out as these little dots. As you give it white light, they turn into the females with the long legs, or the males, which are the stumpy ones, and then they turn into these sporophytes. And when you see it under a microscope, you think to yourself, wow, that it's like your high school like biology lesson happening before your eyes, but you need to get the nutrients exactly right. We then worked with the leading scientists in Australia to map out from 1994 until now how many nutrients actually exist off the east coast of Australia and at what depth. So you can see surface 10 metres, 20 metres, 30 metres. We mapped it, we scaled it, and we've had the privilege of working with data for a long time to work out, will it grow, what happens in the summertime. And you can see gold is nutrients, nitrites, which is what's required. And you can see in the summertime, the nutrients get less as the water, and then you can see the East Australian current driving down the coast every summer. And every year, this gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And we have the data to substantiate it. We started testing. Now, I'm not sure whether you know, there are 50 hectares which are licensed for kelp farming in Twofold Bay. So I just want to put that in context. We're trying to do 200 hectares. There's 50 hectares in Twofold Bay, which is a very, very small bay by comparison. We started testing there, and we got a lot of mixed results. And now, in my perfect world, we never had to go anywhere near disaster bay. But the trouble is the Kaya River has so much runoff that comes down, and there's runoff that comes out of Eden, and there's a sewage farm which is there, and if you get 50 mil of rain, you can get a lot of nutrients pumping into Twofold Bay. And kelp doesn't like nutrients because the fouling gets on the kelp and it stops the photosynthesis, so it stops growing. And what we realized was we just couldn't get a steady growth rate in this location, testing in 2 locations, Whale Spit and the Cannery Wharf. We've worked with our partners, the mussel farming guys, because we wanted it to work, but it just doesn't. Now, what we have worked out is you can seed it in Disaster Bay, and you can bring it back here and then grow it if it gets through the juvenile stage. So we're looking at that more closely. So we work with the New South Wales government to then start testing in Disaster Bay, at the same time going through this lengthy regulatory approval process, which I'm going to come to now. And obviously, and this has been incredibly successful. Obviously, we then had this small test area. I'm sure anyone that's gone to Greenglades, north end of Greenglades Beach, you walk out, you can see a kilometre offshore, 4 yellow markers, very difficult to see anything else, but that's where we've been testing. And there it is there. And you can see there's the 4 corner markers there. I took this at 30 metres with 10 times zoom because it's hard to see. But Disaster Bay is a large expanse of water. Then what we did was we put in a testing program and we said, let's throw out everything we think we know about kelp farming, because no one else in the Southern Hemisphere has been able to farm this kelp. New Zealand haven't had any luck. It's very difficult to propagate. So we then started doing a testing program every single month. And now I know someone said, well, Chris doesn't live at Wonboyn. I've done 18 trips to Eden to seed 18 runs in the last 12 months. I have driven that road between Melbourne and Sydney because such is my commitment. We try twine and we have, and this is the seed stock, the sporophytes here. You can see 2.8 grams of sporophytes. We bought this 10,000 euro seeding machine they use in the Northern Hemisphere, and we've been seeding the lines and we've been testing them. And this is what they look like when they are, so they go in at 1 to 2 millimeters, and this here is at 45 days. The growth is biblical. It happens so quickly. This is, there's 49, so you can see 66, 84, 107, 125, and you can still see, remember, there was stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, still in stage 1. No one even knew how old the colonia was when it started to mature and then become fertile. And then you can see here, this line here is 200 days old. This line here is 140 days old. And we've been measuring, every line has a name, a provenance, a blend, how the process, a different rope. And what we've been doing is measuring all of these, then bringing these out of the water and weighing them and then determining how much loss we get in storms. And this was the biggest revelation.
Chris.
Yes,
Can I just ask,
Sure.
these are vertical.
yes. We're trying to get them really close. So we started out at 5 metres. So we started out 5 metre lines at 5 metres. And then we started bringing them into 4 metres and then into 3 metres and then into 2 metres. And we actually think you can grow them at 1 metre. We weren't sure whether they'd tangle and what the swell effects would be with storms. The closer, the better. The closer you can put them, the less farms you need. Yeah.
That's my main concern.
Yes, and so I'll talk about the rigs and I'll talk specifically about whales because of all the things, it is the greatest unknown. So if it's all right, I will come to that. The reason why the lines we use, let me just go back here. The reason we don't loop the lines. Every line is an individual single line that drops down to stop any whale from getting looped and caught. All the systems are under tension and never globally, in all the kelp farming that has existed worldwide, has there ever been a negative interaction with a whale or a dolphin related to kelp farming, but globally. Now, sorry? Yes, well, just so you know, ship strikes, 40,000 whales, ingestion of plastics, 200,000 whales killed per year.
If someone hits one of those in a little tinny at about 30 kg and they get thrown out of their boat.
Yeah. Can I just say this though? We are talking 1.1 minimum kilometres offshore in the middle of Disaster Bay.
I fished right out there. I fished right down south.
Yeah.
In a 14-foot tinny.
There are mussel farms in Tupole Bay. There are mussel farms in Jervis Bay. There are oyster infrastructure all around Wonboyn. I would say you need to know where the infrastructure is. And but you are right. When you say it is an inconvenience and we don't want you to hit
It's a
it.
danger, not an inconvenience.
Okay, it's definitely a danger. I would say you need to balance up the danger versus the benefit. And then, but you are right. I'm not going to deny for 1 second. If you speed into there in a boat and you don't know what you're doing, it won't be good.
If you don't see it.
Yeah, true. Yeah, true. If you don't see it. So, but I will come to the rigs in a second and show you because a tinny's probably good, but we'll come back to that. So we've had 5 storm. So we've been seeding runs here in Disaster Bay for 2 years. Every single one that we put in has worked. Every single one. That's how good this piece of water is. We've had storm events. This is I don't know whether you know about the Manly Wave Rider buoy, which is directly off Disaster Bay at the moment. It measures wave height, swell, ocean temperature, direction. We had 13-metre peak wave heights in the start of July. I don't know whether any of you went to the beach and saw the whole beach was gone. Yeah, like it literally, it's like the Gold Coast. It was gone. Now, we did not lose any kelp in that storm event. The juveniles, the mature lines, and we grow them out because we're trying to work out how long should they be in the water for, what's the optimum weight, what's the biomass calculation. We did not lose any kelp. Now, I know there's a rumour floating around. There was a lot of kelp on the beach. It's the kelp farm. Now, I'm just going to say, we have some 60 lines out there as it stands right now in Disaster Bay. We haven't lost the blade.
Excuse me.
Yes.
That's not quite correct. There's a lot of kelp on the beach after an East Coast flood. It can be up to 2 metres thick and the whole fasts have been ripped out.
Yes,
Okay.
true.
All right. So there's not a rumour.
They don't come from the kelp farm.
Well, I don't know where
Yeah.
it comes from the ocean.
No, for sure.
Like,
Sure.
honestly, it's every East Coast flood and with the global warming and the weather patterns changing and the ocean temperature and the dipole effect and all the rest of it, the East Coast floods are getting more and more vicious.
I agree. But the point I want to make about the kelp farm is this: the insinuation was the kelp farm was contributing to the kelp that was washing up on the beach, and because the line flops around and the kelp is actually very strong, it can't reach the tensile breaking point to rip it off because the line itself moves. And so, and because it's neutral buoyant, I can hold 50 kilos of kelp at the surface, no weight on the line. And I would encourage, if anyone ever wants to come out and have a look and see it for yourself, I welcome it. It is so extraordinary in its hydrodynamics that this kelp is not ending up on this beach is just the point I'm making. Yes, there are stories from John Evans, who's my next door neighbour, in his 80s, that Green Bay Beach was covered in kelp 2 metres deep, the entire length of the beach.
Story.
Seen that.
Yes.
Seen it.
So there,
That's right.
and it's a natural process. It's part of a nutrient cycling process. It's good for the beach, and we're actually getting less kelp now washing up on the beaches than we ever had because the kelp is getting thinner. Speak to any abalone diver, and he will say to you, "We've got problems," and you know they call it white rock. We've got
Question. How long has this kelp has been washing up on the beach? Been washing up on the beach, 10 years, 15, 20?
thousands of years.
So the idea of this kelp farm causing that problem can't exist because the kelp farm wasn't there 1 year.
Yeah, no, thank you, and I'm in violent agreement that is the case. All I want to say is we don't believe we're going to get any loss from the kelp farm. It is not going to change the way you operate in Disaster Bay, Green Glades, or North Wonboyn Beach, because we haven't seen any loss. Now, here's the location of the kelp farm, and I agree it's big. Now, you might say, why is it so big? Disaster Bay, roughly 40 square kilometres, and this is 2 square kilometres of the 40 from point to point. Now, the way the regulatory approval process works is we had to estimate how big we needed this farm to be before we knew how to grow it, before we knew how fast it grew, before we knew how long it took to grow, and we had to pick a number. So we picked a number which was the biggest thing that we could reasonably kind of get our head around, and we cannot change it. So I can't go back and modify the state significant development application to change that to a different size. That is what I'm stuck with. That is the process which we did. So now you might say, well, how far is it? Well, it's 1.1 kilometres offshore from the closest points, 1.6 from America, 2.6 kilometres from Wonboyn Beach. And I want to state that a 2 metre high person can see 2.6 kilometres over the ocean, depending upon the conditions, before the curve of the Earth starts to affect their ability to see any buoy on the surface. So my view is you're not going to see it from this beach. According to the research and the modelling which we've got, 6 kilometres, someone posted a shot from the lookout and said, this bay is going to be covered with 24,000 buoys. It is nothing like that. Maximum, it will be 1,000 buoys. And you might say, geez, 1,000 sounds like a lot. There are more than 1,000 oyster baskets in the Wonboyn entrance. Now, you might say, well, I don't want 1,000 oyster baskets in Wonboyn entrance either. If the oyster farmers were going through a state significant development process right now, there would be people who would not want it to exist. And we have the finest oysters in the whole world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we got them.
Yeah, and they're right here, and they're critical industry. They're the canary in the coal mine. It's incredibly important to us. And so I say, on the same measure for mussel farming, oyster farming, we have to take the same lens as it relates here. But I will say, this is out in the middle of the ocean. Now I know I appreciate there are people who fish out here. That, you might say, well, what's on the bottom here? We mapped the entire bottom of the ocean, and we actually just last week completed underwater drone footage and sonar of the whole bay. And we only found one thing on the surface of the ocean because it's all sand. As you move closer to shore, the sand's a little redder because of the millions of years of the rocks being broken down. We only found one thing, and that was someone's jetty post. Obviously, when we have one of those big storms, the jetty post has obviously got heavier than water. It's on the bottom of the bay. There is one jetty post which is out there, but this is what's classified as an ocean desert. And here's how the rigs work. I want to specifically go back to Wales. So the reason this is designed this way is they're not interconnected to each other. Every line is independent. Everything is in 1 hectare grids, and they're more than 10 metres apart, so that the plan is that whales can effectively see it. And it's been proven. I mean, you can speak to the mussel guys. They get humpbacks come in and sit beside the mussel farm. They know exactly where it is. But that doesn't rule out that there won't be an issue in the future. I can't rule it out because I don't know, but we can put the best designs worldwide in place, screw anchors that won't come loose, 35 to 45 millimeter lines, floats that are spaced, and let's just do it from the side. They might say, I'm going to run my tinny across there. The backbone is actually below the level of a standard tinny. So you could technically run over it, but I wouldn't recommend it. I don't think it's a great idea. There are 4 corner markers on the 4 extremities required by New South Wales Maritime, and they have flashing lights on them, but they're very, very low level flashing lights. These are the screw anchors, which are designed out of New Zealand, world leading. If you want to remove the farm, you can unscrew the screw anchor. The screw anchor will not rust because as you drive it into the sand, it goes to a level where there's no oxygen, so you don't get corrosion. So effectively, if you left it there, it's not going to erode, it's not going to go away. And it has a polyethylene sleeve that stops any chafing as it comes out of the sand, so the rope doesn't wear away. Now, I've also had a comment online, what about microplastics in the ropes? You've got, for every rig, you've got a backbone, which is effectively 1 kilometre, 10 100-metre lines. And then each of those, and here's the lines we drop off, here's the vertical lines that drop down to the ocean. They're 8 metres long, and they're made of this nylon line. We seed them at the start of the year, and we pull these lines out, strip them, and then reuse them again the next year. So these droppers aren't always there. They get removed after every harvest, and you can see this backbone is below the level of below the surface of the ocean. This is exactly what our mussel brethren use as well. All individual lines, because what you're trying to avoid is a cascading failure. Overseas, they use what's called a catenary system. They connect them all. We've got a lot of whales out here, and we know because we've been out there 18 times. There's a lot of whales. Now, an amazing amount of whales. And, they were down to their hundreds. Now there's 30,000 whales that are coming up and down the coast. It is absolutely amazing. My biggest fear is there's an issue with the whale. It's actually, it's the one thing, yes, it's under tension. I don't believe they can get tangled, but if there's something that keeps me awake at night, it's exactly that. And then I say to myself, okay, should we not do it because of that? I weigh up that we have to do this, and then we have to test, and we have to monitor, we have to put cameras in, we have to see how the whales interact with these farms. You don't just go straight to 200 hectares. Maximum, there's 101 hectare plots on that 200 hectare farm, because you need space to be able to get around them. And we also want, mammals to be able to move around if they want to go in there. They're not all together. It's not one giant grid. They're all separated and they're all disparate. So we then take the kelp, and as you can see, we've been weighing them, we've been testing them, we weigh how much is fouled, how much is food grade, and then we've been testing it as a food grade product. And if you take the kelp, we've got like 100 kilogram mix, just at 31 degrees today. I don't know whether anyone saw, which I think is it. So if you take this brown kelp, you put it in boiling water, you can see it goes bright green because it activates the chlorophyll. Absolutely amazing, like a science experiment happening right before your eyes. You then take that, chop that up, turn it into a beautiful snack, high in minerals, high in omega-3, omega-6, omega-9, lipophilic acids, which help you reduce weight. So incredibly good for you. High in iodine, extraordinarily good. Can be worth, for Japanese kelps, $250 per kilo. Now, I don't think we can get that for Australian kelps, but it proves that this is a great food product. You're seeing it in chips. You're seeing it as a supplement for pet food. You can extract multiple ingredients out of this for coidins. It can be used for burns, treatment. It is have you had kelp put on you before?
No, there's a registered nurse and a bird let a person was burnt all the way up here and we put
Kelp, no. Yeah,
it's a long time ago.
it is absolutely amazing in the things that it can do. And then what we've been doing is saying, well, when we get wet kelp, what's the conversion to dry kelp? What can we do with the kelp? I eat kelp every single day. Sprinkle it on my food. I'm getting it fed to me all the time. We're testing with multiple universities to work out what are the ingredients, how can we cascade the ingredients out of this, what can we do with it? And then finally, we come here to what do you do with the kelp that's not food, brother? And this to me is, I think, the greatest benefit of everything which we're doing here. It is the best fertilizer in the world. Now, for those of you that use sea salt is a fantastic product. But that kelp, for the most part, some of it comes from Australia, washed up on the beach, no farmed kelp. They buy a lot of their kelp from overseas. They fly it in here for our gardens. We want to make that product here for our farmers and for our gardeners because this is great for soil health. Can I please ask Byron to come up and just quickly have a talk about synthetic fertilizers and kelp and what it means?
Everybody. As Chris mentioned, my name's Byron. I'm one of the founders of Barclay Work. Sorry, not as loud as Chris. So I just want to start by saying I want to talk about why I'm supportive of what Chris starts and what Chris is proposing to do. Does anybody know anything about synthetic fertilizers? Does anybody know how synthetic fertilizers are made?
Probably plastic.
No. So in Australia, we've got a lot of agriculture, we've got a lot of farms, and we know we need to farm to grow food, we know we can produce milk and crops and grass and everything like that. So at the moment, nearly, I'd say 95% of our fertilizer comes from overseas, and fertilizer is made basically synthetically. So the way that it's made is something called the Haber-Bosch process. It's mostly done in well, it's all done overseas. We don't make any synthetic fertilizer in Australia. It's made under high energy and high heat, and basically it is one of the highest emission sources in the world. It's responsible for 2% of our global emissions. So not a lot of people know how fertilizer is made. And then we bring all the fertilizer from overseas back to Australia. We put it on our farms, and then it kills our soil. It washes into the waterways. We have issues like what's happening in South Australia.
So let's say synthetic fertilizer. What's it actually made of? Like what is it made out of? Is it made out of lime?
It's made out of natural gas and fossil fuels. Yeah. So
That's shocking.
yep. So it's made. It's a really high energy intensity process to make it. We then bring it all the way from overseas to Australia. So all the carbon mold associated with that. We then put it on the farms. It kills all the microbiology in the soil if it's not used properly. And then an interesting fact is only 30 to 50% of that synthetic fertilizer is taken up by the plant. So the rest of it just gets washed off into the atmosphere or gassed off. And we're left with those things that happen in South Australia. Algal blooms, there's more nutrients running into the waterway, it's killing our soil.
Bad for our oysters, bad for our mussels.
Bad for the mussels, bad for all the marine life. And not many people know anything about that. So one of the reasons why nobody knows about it is because there hasn't been a lot of alternatives. So at Ocean Work, we make what we call biostimulants, biofertilizers. So we make fertilizers out of fish, other seafood waste, mussel shells, and this is why we think kelp is so important. So if Chris can harvest the kelp, we can turn that kelp into fertilizer. We can actually start to displace some of the synthetic fertilizers that we're using on the farms, and we know we can grow healthier grass, healthier food, and we'll have healthier animals, and that'll lead to healthy humans as well. So Now, we're all for what Chris is doing, we'll throw our whole support behind it.
Yeah, I mean, in the first, I guess, you know, that's the regular health department is with the animal feeds and the gas, but I didn't see it in the next set of information, is that that's still.
Yeah, no, we're feeding it to chickens currently.
Yeah.
To understand the effects of kelp and mussel shells. Feed to chickens what happens to the health of the egg weight, the longevity of the hen. And we're working with Charles Sturt University to study that. The trouble with trying to work on ruminant animals is you need a hell of a lot of kelp because they eat a lot. And so we're focusing on chickens because the highest protein source in the world is chicken meat. More chickens are eaten than all other protein sources put together. And so we're focusing on chickens, and we've got small scale programs working with Beaker Valley Eggs. Doing the program where we have hens where we feed kelp supplements to them and mussel shell supplements and then others which we don't. And then we measure the results to see what's the difference.
So that are you going to go back to the beginning?
I don't think we're going to be able to, with this farm, we're not going to be able to solve the cattle problem. And so, the short answer is no. Do I wish that we could? Can I say, we cannot have enough kelp. I think that's the message which I want to say to you. And there are no kelp farms in Australia, not a one, because no one is insane enough to take on the regulatory approval process and, quite frankly, the criticism. It's tough. So, sorry.
So the last thing I really want to say about synthetic fertilisers is 60% of the fertiliser that we use in Australia and globally is urea, and urea is made from ammonia. So just to make ammonia, you use as much energy to produce 1 tonne of ammonia to run 60 Australian households for a week. So let's let that sink in. 1 tonne of ammonia production can run 60 Australian houses for a week. So it's a huge energy emission process. We can take the kelp straight from Disaster Bay, we can ferment it using natural processes, we get all the biological activity in that product, and we can get that out to our farmers to use. So they can stop using synthetic fertiliser, we can grow healthy animals, we can grow healthy food. So we're on board. This is a local trial that we've been doing with fire stimulants. So one of our local dairy farmers, who a lot of people in the room here probably know, Toad Heffernan, he has been a traditional dairy farmer for his whole life, and he's used what all the dairy farmers are using in a lot of ways is traditional fertiliser, so nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So we approached Toad and said, let's do a trial. So obviously, fertiliser is a really big problem for the dairy industry because of the Scope 3 emissions. Toad said, at the moment, I'm using 150 kilos of urea to the hectare. We said, well, let's do a trial with some biostimulants. Let's cut your fertiliser, your synthetic fertiliser back to 30 kilos a hectare, so a significant reduction. And let's put some fish-based biostimulants down and see what happens. So this is the best winter crop he's ever grown. He's had multiple rotations of cows on here. It's the best grass. He claims it's the best grass he's ever grown. And now the really interesting thing's starting to happen. He's been watching his cows, and he's now seeing immense health benefits in his cows. He's not having to treat those cows with any chemicals because they haven't been treated with chemicals on the grass they're eating. And his milk counts are getting better. He's getting better results from his milk, and he's getting better dollar value for his milk per litre. So when you think about this holistically, there's a huge change that can be made in Australian agriculture, but we need biomass to be able to do it. So again, that's what we need to try. In terms of price, or it's actually quite often cheaper to use biostimulants than synthetic fertilisers. So it really depends on what your crop is and how hungry your crop is, but by and large, it's a lot cheaper. That's all I want to say, Chris. So happy to take questions.
Thank you, Colin. No, I much appreciate it. So,
I've got a bit of a dilemma, Chris, and that is in an initial, as I understand, proposal, you said that the beach was, I don't know if you said it was dead or there was not much going on. A desert or whatever.
ocean desert.
Okay.
Ocean desert.
I've been here since September 1957, My dad didn't buy a boat for 12 years. We fished that whole beach, and I was still doing that. I used to catch beach worms, but nothing more.
Yeah.
I just use chicken in the middle of the day, and I catch green glass.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's incorrect. Also, it was stated that you did proper consultation. I live in Adelaide Avenue, there's 22 houses there. One other person knew about it, and I had to find out about it from another resident. So if you're telling the regulatory body these things, these lies, why should we turn around and believe a word you say?
I'm sorry, I'm gonna interject again. Was secretary of the Ratepayer Station 2 years ago. Ratepayer and I sent out an email to everybody. Ratepayers financial.
I didn't get it, I've asked a lot of other people, and I didn't get it either.
List of everyone I sent it to. So if anyone said that they weren't told August 2023, I'm sorry, I'm going to say I'm really upset about that because Ray and I made sure everyone was informed.
No.
Everyone, financially.
Yeah, nothing about it.
And go Kerry recently, so you asked her.
Well, yeah, nothing about it.
And how about the grade?
So, but can I say, we haven't submitted the EIS yet, and it is not my intention. Why would I keep this story from anybody?
But if this is all so good and everything else
Yep.
as well, why did you have to lie about it?
Lie about which bit?
About the death of the beach, or there's nothing there?
No. Just so you know, ocean desert is a technical term for an area that has no coral, no seagrass. It's a sandy bottom. So you need to not get lost in the fact that I'm saying that the bay has fantastic fishing. I've fished here my whole life. My grandmother taught me to fish here. I've been on the same journey as you have. I know how good the fishing is. Ocean desert is a term, but I don't take kindly to being called a liar because I can only put out through the Ratepayers Association as much information. I put up signs at the shop, we put it online, we go on the radio, we put it in the newspaper. Now that you missed it, sir, I'm sorry,
Well,
but I will just tell you.
Newspapers, listen to the radio,
Yeah,
but I do have an email. I have not received one.
I hope you're on our email list now, and just so you know,
Every person in our street, only one person knew about it.
well, just so you know, it's not through lack of trying from my perspective. And surely you can look at me and see how earnest I am about this. I have nothing to hide here. In fact, quite frankly, you should be side by side with me if you want my honest opinion. Because if Alga Bloom comes here, you'll be the first to say, why didn't someone do something? Now, I can't judge what you see and what it is you don't see. But I will say I have tried, and I'm trying now. I'm coming back again, and I'll come back as many times as I need to, because this is more important than anything that I've ever been involved with in my whole life. I feel a moral obligation to actually do something. Now, if that's not good enough for you, and if you want to hang on the fact that you think I haven't informed you, I am telling you from the bottom of my heart that is not true. Now, that's either good enough for you or it's not. I want to promote this from the rooftops, but you know, there are people who will never be convinced that this is a good thing to do. And just so you know, it's exhausting because this is like the good fight. And then I'm getting my teeth kicked in. And quite frankly, it does make you gun shy. It does. When people say there are going to be 24,000 floats, there'll be bioplastics, it's going to ruin the environment, it's going to wash up on the beach, I think to myself, my head wants to explode. Now, I'm sorry if you didn't know. That's why we're here right now. And I've never made the claim that we have done anything other than tried to consult the community. You know, anyone that wants to object against this, I want them to object. Because I want you to put your facts and your reasons for not wanting it versus all the reasons we've just talked about for doing it. Please object. It actually makes us better. It forces us to look at things that we haven't looked at before. That's the purpose of community consultation. And I'm sorry if that comes across as terse, but you can only try so much. I don't know whether you've ever been in a situation where someone says, yeah, but you're not communicating with me and you think you are. It can hurt you. So this is where we'll operate from. The Gotcha Baits building, which is at, we know this building down here at Snug Cove. It's been unused since Gotcha Baits stopped processing baits for people's fishing. It's a fantastic location. And, I spoke to some locals today and they said to me, geez, Eden's dying. It's got no industry. There's no jobs for our young people. We used to have 2 fishermen's clubs. It used to be a lively town. We're trying to do something here that I think is good all round. On the other side of the bay is Edram. This is the Pentark facilities. There are less and less and less forestry which is taking place. They've got their own wharf access. There's the multipurpose wharf, which is used by the Navy. Office buildings, which we can utilise. A staging area to stage everything. I want to stress this right now. Nothing comes through Wonboyn. I've heard trucks coming through Wonboyn, servicing it off Green Glades Beach, running it through the entrance. Not true. I've nearly killed myself on that entrance 3 times. I don't know whether you've ever had that experience. It's a super dangerous entrance. I wouldn't wish it upon anybody. You can think you've got it all under control, and then that road wave comes up, and literally I've nearly launched myself into space there. We will not use Wonboyn. Nothing will come through Wonboyn. Everything through here, through industrial facilities, no requirements that are required from council or government to be able to use those facilities. Now, I really want to take you through this because I think it's very important. New South Wales has the highest regulatory process, the highest bar of any state in Australia, and equally to, and I don't think that's a bad thing, and probably in the whole world. Now, we go through this thing called preparing for an environmental impact statement. The reason why we have to do a state significant development is because all coastal waters, regardless of the project, require state significant development. So that doesn't count for estuaries. So oyster leases are different. It's everything offshore to 3 nautical miles. You have to go predict the impacts, refine the project, minimise the negative impacts, mitigate the negative impacts, and then manage it. And then what you've got to do is you've got to go and take people into consideration, all of us. What does this mean for all of us? How does this work? And then we break the project down into these set of individual categories: shading, noise, visual amenity, vessel emissions, literally break it down to the most granular level. And then what we do is we then have to consult with 15 agencies, 17 federal acts, 8 cultural and heritage acts, 12 policies, 8 regulations, 33 guidelines and policies, and 8 other. Now, just so you believe me, here's the agencies: Independent Planning Commission, Transport for New South Wales. I won't go through all of them. Department of Planning and Industries, Department of Biodiversity and Conservation, Heritage New South Wales, Crown Lands, federal, state, and local government. And then we then have to interrogate these acts, these 17 acts. I think the important ones: Environmental Planning and Assessment Act, Environmental Protection and Biodiversity Act. Will we hurt the environment? Then we have to take into account Aboriginal cultural heritage, European heritage, code of practice if we find something, and then all of these policies, all of these processes, and then, SEERS is what we report under. And then under SEERS, which is the Secretary's Environmental Assessment Requirements, we then have to produce an EIS taking into account everything which you've just seen, plus these 33 guidelines. And then, as you can see at the top of the list here, the local residents and communities. So it's our job as part of this process to make sure we understand what it is you think. Now, it's not our job to convince you that we're right. It's our job to make sure you're informed so that you can suitably respond if you don't want it to happen. And then all of that culminates in this. Now, this is our environmental impact study. This is 120,000 words, which breaks down every single aspect of this project. And you might look at this and say, okay, that's a lot of information. Every single chapter against everything which we just discussed, all the independent reports all come up to this one document. You might say, okay, that's a very interesting document. That's $1.5 million. Let's read it that. $1.5 million, which we have funded because we believe so strongly that we need this industry.
Absolutely.
I want you to read this. Now, you might say, well, that's a bit unfair. You give me a 200-page document, you ask me to read it. Now, before it goes to you, this has to go through a process which is called a REAP, which is a new process under New South Wales Government, which is the Registered Environmental Assessment Practitioner. They study this document to make sure that this document complies with all of these acts and that it has all the necessary information and that it's suitably objective. We're not here to sell this to you in this process. This is warts and all. Everything broken down in risk factors. If you want to know how to undermine this project, if you want to know what's going to go wrong, it's in here. And you know, I want it to be in here. Because I'm not here to pretend that this is a perfect project. But the work, the hundreds of people that have been involved in the creation of this, our scientists, Dr. Ignacio Remetal, the people that work in the lab, all of the people, Dr. Maddie Dyring, I've got to work with incredible people in creating this. And their passion for wanting to do something is, I can say, it's inspiring. It actually keeps us going when we're thinking, my God, will people say you want to do this to get rich? I tell you what, there's no way any person would do this of sane mind because profit is their objective.
Too hard. But, I just have noticed some chart and we used Kelp on a burn. A person who was burned outside of the and she survived. So Kelp is dead.
Look, it's natural. I've been eating it for the last 5 years, never got cold, never been sick. So I encourage you to eat it as well. It then all comes back to, now all of these documents, pretty much, except for the completed EIS, are available on our website. And our website, I've just cut and pasted out of the website. We produce an annual report every year. I just want to go back to you. I've been doing this for 4 years. We created our first annual report in FY22. It tells you every single thing we're doing, everything we're trying to do, all the tests that have failed, all the things which we're trying to achieve. We do one every single year. Plus, we have frequently asked questions. We try to put out, when we do community consultations or editorials, etc., we try to put it in there. You can click on these images and drill down into these questions. If there are more, I love the questions because the questions help us to make sure that this document has everything and we're not blindsided by any of the process. Now, what is the timing? Right now, this EIS, as you can see in draft mode, sits with the Registered Environmental Assessment Practitioner, and our plan is to submit this in February 2026. When that happens in February 2026, and maybe it's March and maybe it's April, but it will be in that kind of zone, that is when your call to action, if you want to object, that's when you do it. You object in response. You see, you need to respond in relation to what this says. And you can challenge it. You can say, I think it's crap. You can say, I disagree because this or X, Y, or Z hasn't been considered. But that is the time people say, I'm not getting the chance to have my say. Your chance to have your say in the process is when we provide all the information so that we make sure that your objection is not already addressed. And if it's not to your satisfaction, please say. I want you to say, I want to be challenged on this. I don't want to leave any stone unturned. I'm not trying to push this through on you. There's a 30-day public exhibition, and that's when you object. And if it's successful, we'll put our first rigs in February 2027. That's more than a year and a half away. Now, if this process takes longer, this could push to 2028. You have to put it in February because that's when your seeding run starts. You don't want to seed in summer because there's not enough nutrients in the water for the young kelp to be able to take. So, yes. Oh, sorry. Online. Yeah. Now we'll come to questions for online. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yes. No. Well, we're going to try and do that. I'm not even sure how much time we've got, but so what we did was we asked for questions and like beforehand, and then, and what I've done is I've written those down. Obviously, I'd like your questions as well. One of the questions was, are we proposing to farm and sell carbon credits in the future? And the answer is no. No, no, no. Because if you use the kelp, you release the carbon again. So there's no carbon credits. Now, I don't know why people are, yes, we've been involved in measuring carbon, but I'm not in the business of trying to create a carbon business out of disaster today, trying to create food, trying to create nutraceuticals. We're trying to create fertilizer replacements. Are you contemplating any further expansion of the proposed farm? It's a great question. No. And nor the 200 hectares was really set because we really didn't know what we were dealing with. And we've had to do 4 years of testing just to know how to even respond to the EIS. I wouldn't want any more farms in Disaster Bay, and I would actually think that I would rather have a kelp farm than someone sweeping in and saying, hey, this is a fantastic place to put a salmon farm. I think if it's got a kelp farm, that won't happen. It is my honest belief. So no proposed expansion to the farm. In my dreams, I would like to be able to go into Commonwealth waters, more than 3 nautical miles. If we could grow it out there, that would be fantastic because there's only so much space. You can't go further north because the nutrients just aren't there. And obviously we've reached the border. So, and you don't want to be in the primary whale migration zones in their park. So I think we're limited. I think it's Disaster Bay or it's offshore. So no further expansion. Would we ever consider on-selling the business to a local or a foreign buyer? No. No. Well, my family's been here for 5 generations. We will never lose control of the farm, which is in Disaster Bay. You know what? Because I, like you, don't really trust people to do the right thing. But I know my absolute commitment to never do anything wrong by Wonboyn is worth more to me than that farm. So we'll never on-sell. We'll never lose control of it.
Ask the question.
Please.
Would you consider diversifying? Barry, we talked about fish being one of your key elements.
Yeah.
Why? I'm just really concerned. Why isn't Australia tackling the carp problem and using that as an incredible resource, far bigger than what you're considering?
You're absolutely spot on, and we are trying. We're in early conversations with New South Wales and Victorian government about a car project.
Yeah.
It's too early to talk about at the moment, but we are doing whatever we can to start taking.
Maybe you should get Chris on site because he's pretty convincing.
Well, just so you know, I am working with them on this exact project because you can have the fish waste, and and all the fish waste in New South Wales gets processed into fertiliser.
Yeah.
Isn't that a good? Aren't you happy to know it's not going to landfill, which is where it used to go? He spent 6 years of his life. Tim and Kyron, the 2 brothers, spent all their money just on the fact that they're trying to make the world a better place. And we are talking about carp, but in the end, you still need the kelp because it provides something that the carp doesn't. The carp provides the nitrogen. The carp provides the key element, but the magic is in the kelp. This is true. It is like the most magical thing on this whole earth. So, and we want to do that. And there's also salmon waste in Tasmania, which you're looking at.
Considering global warming, which is happening, is it going to work eventually? I mean, if it goes up 2 degrees, you're saying the kelp dies off.
Because we breed it in the lab, this kelp will still grow. We've seeded kelp at 23-degree water temperature. I got told by all the universities it wouldn't grow. It grows.
Yeah.
It grows. So it's the breeding process that gets thwarted. So I think long after all the wild kelp beds are gone, let's run that worst possible scenario. Yeah. These kelp farms will still be here. So, yes, ma'am. Well, you're talking about sea urchins? Yeah, so the sea urchins can't come up to the kelp, so they can't affect the kelp lines. So as the ocean temperature increases, the sea urchins move further and further south. And so that really is, that's a big issue. So their breeding cycle gets affected. Then they reach kind of, they're not so good at reproducing as they do every single year. The sea urchins come in past a tipping point, but they can't get up the lines to get to our kelp. So we don't have a sea urchin problem.
That's that. With most aquaculture, whenever there's a concentration of species, it resides an increase in pests and invasive issues that are harder to control. Do you foresee anything in the kelp farming issue that could possibly jeopardize other wild kelps?
Because we're in a relatively, probably the cleanest bay in New South Wales, I'd probably say that with quite a lot of certainty. Kelp is not a vector for disease. So it's very different to shellfish, for example, which can really get affected by many, many different diseases that are water temperature affected. Kelp's not a vector for it. So I can't see that there's any scenario where there's an unknown pathogen or disease that affects the kelp farm. And, it's very, in one sense, it's very hardy because it grows through photosynthesis and the absorption of nitrates and phosphorus from the water. So it's pretty well protected. So thank you for the question, though. Is there a risk of increased shark attacks in Disaster Bay once the farm operates? This is one of the questions. Disaster Bay has a lot of sharks, as you know, and we are not we're not fishing for sharks anymore. It stopped, how long ago? How long ago did we stop? Yeah, 6 years. So now, definitely there will be more fish life around the kelp farm, which is 1.1 kilometres offshore. I can't, now, getting attacked by a shark is a very low probability. You've got more chance of being killed in a car accident or getting struck by lightning than you do the shark attack. But I can't, I don't know the answer to that question. But a farm now, but the research states that where kelp is present, there are less of the apex predators. But we looked at the research and we went away, and this is one of those questions that makes us bad. We need to put something in the EIS which kind of correlates that. It is a super low risk. Kyron said to me, I'd rather have, 20 happy sharks than one unhappy shark. I think if your food web is intact, I think that's net a positive thing. I only regularly surf fish off the beach. Will kelp seaweed wash up on the beaches? And my answer to that is no. All of our research indicates we don't lose any kelp off the lines. What impact will the farm have on fishing populations? Our view is they'll improve. And all research globally indicates you create habitat, you're going to have a cascading effect. It will increase fish. Will migrating whales be impacted? As I said before, never in the world has there ever been. I actually have a slide on whales if you'd like to see a slide after this, talking about what does impact whales. Loose lines that can wrap around a whale, so there's greater risk from a basket on the bottom of the ocean with a thin line and a tension system. Very low risk, a lot of documentation, a lot of reference documentation. Even though we deemed it as a low risk, we increased the risk to put monitoring in place to force the monitoring, because then forces how it is you have to respond to particular scenarios. But if I thought we were going to entangle whales, I wouldn't do it. How many flashing lights and navigation buoys, I beg your pardon, I spelled buoys wrong, will be employed? 4. Compared to Green Cape Lighthouse, I would consider it infinitesimally small, but 4 buoys. From the beach, you won't see the buoys that are at the furthest extremities because it's 3.1 kilometres offshore. I don't believe you'll see them.
The ones actually not there now, boys, with the sea boys clearly at the moment.
Yes. Well, that's 950 metres off the high water mark, right now as it stands. I think it stands out because the 4 of them are clumped together because it's only 100 metres by 100 metres by 100 metres, so it's quite strong. I think that will stand out a lot more. But yes, visual pollution, that is a reality. I can't take that away, but nor can I take away looking at oyster baskets or take away looking at houses and it's the one thing I think, if you want to object to this EIS, you should be objecting in relation to visual amenity. You say, I don't want to look out at Disaster Bay and see that. I understand that, but we have pushed it. We've tried to be as far offshore as we possibly can. Quite frankly, I wish we were further, but we know that it grows at that level, and we keep changing things around, it can be a problem. So I hope that answers that question. What is the long line made of? It's made of polypropylene. So it's marine grade polypropylene. Will there be microplastics? Sorry, I'll continue 1 second. Marine grade polypropylene, 35 millimeters, 45 millimeters on the long line. I don't believe it'll ever break.
You're saying there's going to be 4 rights?
Yes.
How many of the testing at the moment?
4.
Over 4.
Yes, there's 4 now. Yeah, you have to mark your corner extremities under New South Wales.
No, it takes longer to strobing across at night that we search.
I'm not sure where. Are you talking about where our test farm is?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So can I just ask, where do you see it from?
My house.
Yeah. So up behind Danch Road. Can you see that from there?
Yes.
Yeah. My understanding is, on the mapping we've done, from your house, because the kelp farm's further around, you won't see. That's what I believe. Now, I'd love to look at it from your balcony.
Yeah.
I don't believe you'll see the proposed kelp farm from that location. Now, you might ask, why did we put that there? The answer is because to drive all the way across Disaster Bay, if I go out of sight of my wife when I was seeding line, she gets really stressed out. So we put it closer to make easier access, but then we realised the bar's too dangerous. And yes, you can read all the reports, they're all online. University of Wollongong did a 540 person blind survey, 75%, so 180 for Bega Valley Shire, 180 for Eurobodella, and 180 for Shoalhaven. Bega Valley Shire had the highest, 75% positive for kelp farming, 2% negative, the rest I don't know. There are some very active people against this. There is a gummy shark fisherman who doesn't want it, but overall positive. University of Wollongong did the work. I would ask if anyone wants to see it, read the reports. That is an independent study. Yeah, they did not work for us in that process. Blue Economy CRC funded the process to do it because they want to promote a kelp industry because they see the benefits which we do. The sand on the bottom, I want to be very careful about that terminology. Yeah.
So it's classed as that there's ecosystems that have thrived and survived throughout this time. What will placing that amount of kelp and farming that due to that current ecosystem that is currently thriving and surviving as an ocean desert that is currently there for the animals and the ecosystem that use it as an ocean desert?
Yeah, I love the question because the answer is right now the ecosystem that's there is a benthic system. So it lives in the sand. It's effectively worms, microactivity that exists in the sand. We go and take samples, and we've gone to Elgin, who mapped it. They've gone to take samples within the kelp lease area and outside of the kelp lease area to measure all of the existing benthic habitats that exist. They've done fish assemblages. So they've gone and put cages down, collected the fish, chronicled the fish, because what we want to do, and the reason we did this, even though we didn't have to, we want to prove that it's good for fish, and we want to prove that it's good for the benthic environment. Because that environment is, it is classified as ocean desert. It's not my terminology. It is the terminology that's used. It's not a reflection. It doesn't mean there's no fish there. So my view is positive and positive for both.
Question. You said the word product any number of times throughout your talk. In my experience, product equals profit. So after your outlay of getting this up and running, what's in your?
Well, I hope that let me just. I will go to the next slide, and I'll tell you if that's all right. I promise you I won't get away from that question because it's a question I want. How many nanoplastics will be shared into the food chain? And the answer is an incredibly small amount. If people are worried about marine plastics, do anyone know where the majority of bioplastics that go into Australian oceans come from? No, but cosmetic products is a contributor. Does anyone know?
Washing machine.
Yes, your washing machine. Polyester, nylon clothing, washing it, no treatment system, deals with it. It sheds microplastics. That's number one. That's 35% in Australia. Number two, the rubber that comes off your tyres when you drive your car down the road. Another 30%, and worldwide, that is 35% of all microplastics comes from tyres. Now, the driving which we would do in this room is going to contribute more microplastics to our oceans than this kelp farm will. When you pull lines through, it's a relatively static system. It basically sits there. So it's not getting rubbed, it's not getting agitated, it's not under massive load. So it's a small amount. Microplastics is massive. It's a massive issue. We think it's plastic bottles and wrappers because we obviously see the news and it says, here's the Pacific garbage patch. That's like 5%. It's rubber and synthetic clothing, which is the big issue. So I don't believe that in any way microplastics is going to have an effect on the food chain. On that basis, we shouldn't be mussel farming because the black plastics that are used have the propensity to shed a certain amount of microplastics, but it is inconsequentially small, and in high washing systems will have no effect. It's around cities where the issue is. Last question, what will be the exclusion around the 200 hectare zone? And the answer is there is no exclusion zone. So you can go in there, you can fish in there, you can traverse your way through the different 1 hectare pods. We don't want to restrict it. Now, because I actually think it's going to be a great place to fish. We've been speaking with cruise lines about them having people dive on the kelp farm because they want an attraction for Eden. They want to use kelp in their menus on board ship. They want a story for Eden. And Eden, guys, it needs something. Now, Wonboyn, okay, maybe we're this little microcosm. Eden needs something. Our kids that go to the Marine University, they need futures too. So, what's our vision? Number one, we're on the second last slide. Do no harm. That's our goal. Number two, heal the ocean because it's getting its ass kicked. Number three, grow healthy food and reduce synthetic fertilizers. Now, yes, I could put in here feed, nutraceuticals, reduce methane emissions. We could go off the page. And then you're going to say, well, Chris, what's in it for you? Well, I want to create a drought and bushfire-proof industry. We've lost 2 houses at one point. The 52 fires and my family members, their house burnt down on Wonboyn Lake in the 2020 fires. I've seen the devastation that's gone through this place. The floods that affects the closures for the oysters, massive effect. As the ocean temperature increases, more rain. That's the prediction. More volatile, more rain. Let's create something that gives us another iron in the fire. Protects local waters, 1 hectare modules. This isn't a 200 hectare blanket construction sitting on the face of the ocean, and it doesn't all go out straight away. We put it out in small blocks, and every year we determine, is it okay? What are our yields? How does it work? How do we build it? 38 jobs and associated products. 38 jobs for you. You know, I spoke with Alan Fraser and he used to say to me, you know, he didn't like the fish canning factory, which used to be in town many years ago, and he used to sell cars. And then when they closed down the fish canning factory, he realised the people who bought cars were the people who used to work at the fish canning factory. 38 jobs to a town like this is the difference between our kids having to go off to the city. Forestry is in trouble, fishing is in trouble. This is an industry that I think is going to make a difference. 38 jobs. What's in it for me? Seeing 38 people get employed out here in this town. A business that we can be proud of, that yes, makes a profit. If it doesn't make a profit, it won't be in business. It could be the...
It should be in that folder of yours. So how much is the estimated profit?
Well, the estimated profit depends on your yields, and it depends on the more you can sell food grade, the higher the profit is.
If everything goes right, what will be your best outcome that way?
I think if you made $10 million of revenue, and if you were lucky enough to get $1 million worth of profit out of it, you would be so happy. So what that would do is, that means, and remember, you can't take all the profit out of a business. I probably won't get my money back for 20 years, if that's really where you're going with the question. This is probably a 20-year investment for us. Now, but I don't see it as that. I see it as a commitment to try and do something. Because if this all goes to hell, I won't be able to live with myself if we don't try. And it has made me, and I apologise if I'm direct. This process has made me hard because I just, you know, when you think you're trying to do something good and you think you've got all the evidence and you put it all forward and people lie about you, they lie about the facts, they take vectors that just don't address the issue at hand. It pisses me off. And I'm sorry. So what's in it? It's not for the money. No one would do what I have done if they cared about money.
I don't think I ever said it. I said,
No.
I said, that's in it for you.
Yeah,
I'm saying
it's,
for money.
I want,
As a business,
Yeah.
proposer, part of your proposal for government would be, what would be your outcome for financial management?
what I want most of all out of this is, I want to be proud that we've done something that's actually going to make the world a better place. That's what I want. And you might go, that sounds like absolute crap. Well, I'm sorry. You wouldn't do it if that wasn't the reason. Because the risk is massive. The criticism is, quite frankly, insane. I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy, this process. But I can't know what I know and sit back and look my kids in the eye and say, hey, let's go to Wonboyn and just pretend that everything that's happening is not happening. So what's in it for me? I care. I want people to say, I know Eden. It's where the Kelp comes from. It employs young people who are actually going to have to deal with what we did, the world we built, and we sat idly by, saying, listening to the people who undermine the sheer facts of it all. And the beauty of it is, in 20 years' time, I'm going to say to you, I'll either be right or wrong. And if the oceans magically heal themselves and all the temperatures are automatically all go back to normal, come down to my place and tell me, Chris, you were wrong. But I ask this, if I'm right and things get worse, please give me a break for the people who are the critics. So now, all the processing in the Bega Valley, I want the jobs here. I care about jobs here. I don't want to go to Gippsland. I don't want to go to South Australia. I want to do it for these people who fought our fires, who looked after this town, who've tried their best to eke something out in what is, it's a tough world here. I think this is going to be great. And, you know, do I hope we can expand in the Commonwealth areas? It's a dream I have. I don't know whether it will work. I don't know. And it'll take years. And, you know, the profits that we'll make, I'll go back and try and work out whether that's possible. Yeah.
Chris, look, I have a lot of questions, but I have to say you've answered many of them. firstly, I think it's great that we've done this. I think a lot of the concern of locals, I'm sure there has been misunderstanding. Today has been good. One of the biggest questions for me has always been, why here? And you've been explaining that. I'm not sure why it couldn't have been another 3 days off. The visual impact isn't good. The question of the whales, I was on 2 weeks ago, I saw 20. Okay, is a worry. But to me, the biggest issue, which you're very positive about, but everybody I've spoken to rolls their eyes and chuckles, whether it's national parks, ab divers, trawler boats, etc., is that in an East Coast load, a big one, that you won't have infrastructure and help break off. That's the biggest concern. If that comes onto the natural beach, if it comes up lots the Wonboyn estuary, there being the unknown. Now, I know that your research, and I have to say, I spent 40 years doing research, so I applaud you for what you do. It's very thorough. Your research says nothing will break off. I sort of remember the thing, never say never. What we've seen, the power of the oceans when they're really angry, every 5 years, maybe every 10. I dive, all the rocks are just denuded, everything is clean. That's, I suppose, my biggest worry. You know, being science all my life and research, and I know you've proved this, but I suppose I'm still very, very nervous about that. The other issue of the visual impact does upset me. Just walking along the beach, seeing yellow lights or at night starting to bleach, you know, pristine wilderness, I find difficult. Why it can't go a little bit further out, I don't quite get that. Is it a financial, is it a whatever? The location to me and the impact of the possibility of breakaway, and that's a major concern. One of the questions, I think, in an early one of your proposals reports mentioned maybe having some access through NAGI. That would be a concern, but again,
I told you that's not. Can I address those issues? And when you do the research and the research tells you something, and then you say to me, yeah, but I'm worried that the research is wrong. How do you suggest I respond to that?
What about creating a contingency plan for if there was a breakaway, so that it shows that you've thought about the process? And you say, okay, let's say we lose something and everything ends up on greenways. This is how we're going to.
No, we've done.
Yeah, perfect. So it hasn't been addressed today. If somebody's concerned.
No, you have to.
Yeah.
You have to have a continuity plan. You have to have a plan to remove it off the beach. Even though we don't think it's going to happen, we still have to prepare for it.
And I think that's a lot of people's concern, is that there is a contingency plan, so if the research is wrong.
Yeah,
I know that you're very thorough, and you have definitely answered a lot of my questions. I'm just saying, for the people here, the discussions that I've heard, it is the contingency plan that everybody's like, okay, you guys thought about it.
Anything, if something comes ashore, let's run a scenario. a ship loses power and goes through the kelp rigs break and they end up on the beach. That's plausible. The chances are infinitely small, but it's plausible. Everything has to get removed. It can't get removed through Naji, because Naji is a wilderness area, which is the highest level of protection in Australia. And everything gets clipped onto by boat and pulled back out to sea, because that actually is the way to do it. We've had to model all that and put in plans that show, if that happens, exactly what it is we're going to do. So we have to do that in response to the EIS and for whale entanglement and for literally every scenario that you can possibly imagine. We've had to model.
And just, I've read a lot about like REFs and all sorts of things, and usually I guess when people discuss it to help mitigate all the double-sidedness, if there's just a little bit more about the cons, it's not just the pros, so that it's just demonstrating to people who don't necessarily have to go that deep, that yes, hey, we know that this could happen, this is what we're thinking about, this is the reports we've done and the modeling we've done. So before we end up in this scenario where everybody's questioning it, to show that you've gone, is it like the first reports were very all positive, which is great. And like, I think a lot of people are just worried about it. It is the last building in this area on the New South Wales coast, and we're industrializing it.
You know, if I was a corporate raider and I've never been to Wonboyn ever before, I think you should be worried that I am prepared to do this in my own backyard, where for 5 generations my family has been part of, should provide just theoretically some level of comfort. But I cannot predict the future.
No.
And things may go wrong. And I never for 1 second have guaranteed that it won't happen. I'm just telling you the risks are very, very small. And when I weigh that up, and Sarah will come to you in a second. Okay, thank you. So I, you know, all I can do is put forward the information, study it as hard as I can. But Ian, I can't solve the visual amenity. The problem with going further out to sea is now you're in primary whale migration paths, as opposed to resting areas, which are different things. So there are trade-offs. And, you know, I put the slide up and I said, I wish we didn't have to do anything here. And you asked the question, why? Well, why here? It is the only bay in New South Wales that I believe you can do this in. That is the stake we're in. And it's where the southern currents push up and the East Australian current comes down. And so we get this, you know, circular motion.
Just finishing that, certainly I'm not against kelp farming, I'm not against aquaculture.
Yeah.
And everything you've said on those points, I agree with that, and the benefit, I leave it myself, right?
Yeah.
So when this proposal hit most of us, we might have heard something, it was not high on the radar.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, when it appeared just next to Bay Cliff, blinking lights, and what the hell is this? That's what motivated things.
Yeah.
When, yeah.
It's a location.
Yeah, when
The
I
existing one or the future one?
No, your proposed.
just your test one. When I then spoke to everyone from national parks, their first reaction was, well, hell, you're going to have a lot of kelp on the beach, aren't you? And then people referred to some of what happened with mussel farming and the debris and the infrastructure around Twofold Bay, and they must have done that, but maybe they, because this is going to happen here. I suppose this comment of this woman behind me is good. Like, we went through politically in Australia a very, voice. And one of the benefits of that was we had a pro case and we had a no case. And you had two sides vote, and it allowed you to try to get your head around what was going on. I think you've done an excellent job here, but we've really only had the pro case, and some of us are trying to struggle to see, is there another
If you want the negative case, you can go on Facebook.
I share Facebook.
100%, it's there on Facebook. You know, I don't know what to say other than I really believe in my heart that this is the right thing to do, and that in the future we will look back on these times. You know, the horse hasn't bolted. You haven't lost any rights. Quite frankly, I wasn't even ready to even know all the information that we've known until now. You know, those information sessions before, we knew half of what we know now. We now know its storm capability. We know so much more. We finished the documentation. We've gone all the way through it. There was still a lot of unknowns. We were trying to understand what you thought. I'm not trying, just so you know, I'm not trying to sell this to you. I'm sorry if it comes across as me pitching you. I'm not. There's a bloody good reason I'm trying to do this. That's all I'm trying to say to you. I asked you to be critical. I asked you to take this document and pull it apart. If you don't agree, say it. But I put my hand on my heart and I tell you, this is the right thing to do. And we'll look back on this. Our kids will look back on this and it will mean something. And that means something to me. And I really appreciate everyone's time today. I know it's a pain in the ass. I'm sorry. It's here. For you. I'm sorry.
Chris, nature doesn't care about your modelling. In the 60s, my dad and I were fishing down at Green Glades on the beach. And all of a sudden the stars started disappearing. And by the time we figured out it was a monstrous bloody wave, we were up in the bloody trees. And look at the one that came into Zufile Bay.
Yeah, and got the chip mill wall.
Yeah. 60, 70 foot off the 17.7. Yes, they are extremes.
Yeah.
But if we get those sort of extremes.
Just we've modelled for those 100-year events. I believe that all that happens is it passes over the kelp farm. That's why it's important to have it far enough offshore so you don't get the refraction. So the wave comes in, it obviously hits the shore, it then comes back this way. Energy's going this way and that way. You have to be far enough offshore that the refraction doesn't pull your farm in two different directions at the same time. We've looked at that and modelled all that as much as we possibly can to take into account those 100-year events.
There's 4 questions online.
Is everyone still up for 4 more questions on? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. The first one is from Paul. You stated that to counteract potential algae blooms, we need to be proactive, e.g. have kelp farms. But to have any positive effect, the size of the farms would have to be enormous. Would a mere 200 hectare have any meaningful result?
An algal bloom is a massive thing. My comment to that would be, if you want to keep on taking ammonia and taking natural gas and turning it into synthetic fertilizers, and you don't even want to try with the first step, I say that is something we'll all regret. And so I would say it could make a difference. My personal view is, you should be able, if it's as cost effective to use biostimulants, we shouldn't be able to put urea in crops that are immediately adjacent to waterways. So that runoff doesn't go straight into the ocean and affect these environments. So is it going to solve everything? If we can grow this in Commonwealth waters and we can have farms out over the horizon where hopefully everyone will be supportive, then maybe we can make a difference. But you have to prove it somewhere, and you have to start somewhere. I think it's here. I hope that answers that question properly.
Question from Virginia. Will there be a biodiversity assessment on the benthic assemblages on this mud substrata, which has its own complex ecology?
Yes, and it's not mud, it's sand, so there's no mud in Disaster Bay. So that is being done by Elgin and Associates. And we've also had an EPBC approval from the federal government. It's already approved by the federal government. They look at all of our documentation to determine, is this going to affect critical habitat? So we'll have all the benchmarks and we'll be able to compare those benchmarks in the future to determine whether there a negative effect. So the things that get affected are high levels of nutrients going to the ocean floor. It's a high flushing system, but the answer is probably that's not going to affect it. The other one is shading. Because the kelp is not there all year, it gets seeded at about 200 days, you harvest it, you're not shading it for long periods of time. And because it goes east-west, it actually allows the sun to come across and reach all levels of the ocean. So my view is, I don't believe benthic environments are going to suffer. I believe they should net benefit, but it depends on your view of what benefit is. So, but I don't believe it's an issue.
And last question from Trudy. Does kelp have high levels of lead, arsenic, and cadmium? If yes, in volumes that are not natural for disaster bay, how do we know that this will not impact our natural ecosystems? Also, is it not possible that this could spread to areas beyond the farm area where it would not normally grow?
Lead and cadmium are caused by pollution, and plants and shellfish particularly can pick it up. You're talking about the cleanest waterway in Australia, so I don't believe heavy metals, which is really the issue which we're talking about. It's not an aggregation point for heavy metals. It's in the water for a very small amount of time. If you're worried about that, you need to worry about the kelp beds that exist, where that kelp can be 10 years old, 15 years old, more likely to have an accumulation in older kelp than young kelp. So heavy metals not flagged at all as an issue, but if you put it outside of sewage factory, for example, which is where kelp is grown in Asia, they literally, those kelps are so hard in those heavier than water, Undaria, which is an invasive species coming to Australia, that absorbs everything. They then have to heat that kelp up to a level to burn out that heavy metals. And so it's not as good for you. So that, for me, that there is no risk to heavy metal accumulation and aggregation at all.
Yeah, there are just a few more questions if there's more time. Is Clonia vulnerable to increasing ocean temperatures?
Yes, wild Clonia is. I don't believe that farmed Clonia is, because I can only tell you we've tested it, seeded it at water temperatures that should not sustain its growth, and it does. So I think if we lose our wild kelp beds, I'm just going to, after 6 years of looking at this, we are in so much trouble that I don't even want to think about what that means. So yes, the breeding cycle is at risk. More sea urchins. We've seen programs to remove sea urchins from kelp stands to try and give them a chance. I think that's important.
We're done.
That's it. We're done.
Can I have just one last one?
Sure.
How long is your license? And if you found, I assume maybe 15 years or 20 years or something, if you found that this is an expensive business to do. If you found that it just didn't stack up, it just wasn't viable, water temperatures came, kelp just didn't grow, how difficult is it to remove the infrastructure at the end of this?
Exactly the same effort to put it in is to take it out, and we would have to remove it. There's a bond that has to be provided to New South Wales API fisheries for the cost of removing the farm in the event that the operator goes out of business. So that's the first thing.
That's the question.
So it would be removed.
So you could screw these out the other?
Yes, exactly the same way they go in, they come back out.
Okay.
Yeah. So we would remove it and there would be nothing there. I hope that doesn't happen, but let's see. No, thank you.
Christian, just like to say for a test site, it's obviously all very conducive to what you're proposing and all of that, but if like the government or the powers that be were on board with it, well, surely there would be other places to have test sites or whatever, like, does it make any sense? Like,
it does.
Surely if they have the will, and I mean, there's massive problems across the board, but does it have to be here? I know that might be. Yeah.
No, I thank you for the question, and I love it. So the New South Wales Government Department of Regional Development wrote a seaweed prospectus in 2024. I asked all of you as homework to go and read the New South Wales government seaweed prospectus, which predicts that it's a $900 million industry for New South Wales. Now, I then say to them, you've gone and written this seaweed prospectus. Why don't you provide test sites all across New South Wales? And they say, because we don't have the regulatory authority to do it. So it's left to idiots like me to step up here and then try and go through this regulatory process, as you can see, which is extremely onerous, to try and prove whether this can be done or not. Now, read the seaweed prospectus and see what your government thinks of this, but they won't move because they're regulatory tied. Like, I love our regulations because they're there to protect our environment, and they do such a good job that we actually can't do it. So everybody, I thank you so much for your time. To those of you who don't want this, I'm sorry. To those of you who hopefully can go on this journey with me, I promise you we'll do this with heart. We'll do it taking into account what this means for Wonboyn and Eden. Thank you all for your time.